In this tutorial, we'll quickly review the different Signage players we support. The desktop version is designed to run at a physical location, and it's a dedicated installation on a dedicated PC. The web version of our Signage player is designed to be loaded onto a web browser as a URL. So you can take a specific URL, email it to a friend or colleague, and they can open the Signage presentation inside a web browser. And the embedded version is designed to be embedded inside an HTML website. So we'll go ahead and review the embedded and the web version to show you how to take advantage of these different Signage players. So here we see our Signage Studio, and we'll go ahead and switch to campaigns. And notice that right now I have my digital signage campaign selected, and I have this button right here called the Signage player. Now if I click on this button, I have two options, the Signage player web version and the Signage player embedded version. If I select the Signage player web version, I'm prompted with a URL that I can take, simply copy to my clipboard, paste it into an email, and send it to somebody to review the same Signage presentation that's running for this specific campaign, the digital signage campaign. Now if I had multiple campaigns, I would have to select an additional campaign, click on the same button, and then I would get a different URL for that specific campaign. Again, being able to email that to a friend or a colleague and have them watch the latest version of my signage presentation. Now if I select the second option, the Signage player embedded version, you see that I'm prompted with this HTML snippet, which I can copy to my clipboard, paste onto a website, and have the same signage presentation, in this case the DS campaign, that will run inside a website. Now if I scroll down, you'll notice that I have this width and height parameters. Now I don't have these when I'm using the Signage player web version, because on the web version you're supposed to run the signage presentation on full screen or at the full width and height of your desktop area. However, with the embedded version of our player, you're going to run this presentation inside an embedded web page or an HTML page, and so you need to define the width and the height for this signage presentation. So how do you know the width and the height that you need to set over here? Well, that's pretty easy. Simply close this window, go to your screens, and in this case we are running a high definition screen of 1920 by 1080. Well, that's probably not what you want to do when you run a signage presentation inside a web browser or a web page. Most likely you're going to want to run a much smaller screen configuration. So we can actually add a new screen to our configuration, and let's go ahead and set this to be 800 by 600. Go ahead and click on finish, and we'll go ahead and rename this to embedded version. And of course we can continue and draw our screen division like we normally would. So go ahead and add a new screen division called screen division 4, and we'll draw some configuration that we're going to use for our embedded player. Next I'll switch back to campaigns. And in this case what I'll do is I'll add another output. So right now I have my default output, which is set to be the 1920 by 1080 screen that I've configured earlier. But let's say that I want to add another output for my embedded version of the player. So we'll click on this plus sign right here and click add output. And in this case we're going to select my embedded version for the screen configuration and click on finish. So now we just added the second output to my timeline. Now I'll go to my toolbox and go to screen divisions and go ahead and select the screen division that I drew earlier and drag and drop it. And now I'll go and assign the channels that I want to play for this particular output. So I can go ahead and drag and drop the channels that I want to play at the different regions. And notice now that I have two tabs right here. I have my first output and my second output. In fact, it's better if I rename them. So I'll go ahead and click on my first output, and I'll go ahead and call it my HD output. And for my second output, I'll go ahead and rename it to embedded. And just to review really quick, Right now we're dealing with this digital signage campaign, and we have this particular timeline that we're working on, which has two outputs configured. We have our high definition output, which is set to be 1920 by 1080, and we have our embedded output, which is set to be 800 by 600. So in fact, if I go back to screens just to confirm, again, I got my HD screen, which is 1920 by 1080, and my embedded version, which is 800 by 600. So again, we have a single campaign, a single timeline, and we have two different outputs. Now, notice that these two tabs now have the equivalent names, the high definition and embedded output. And when I click on a particular tab, I can select the signage player embedded snippet. So in this case, I don't want the high definition HTML snippet because I'm not going to embed that onto a website. What I want to do is I want to embed the HTML code for the much smaller configuration for my 800 by 600 screen. So I'll go ahead and click on the embedded tab, and now I'll go ahead and select the Signage Player embedded version. And now I can take this whole code and simply copy and paste it onto a web page and have my presentation run inside a web page or a website with a size of 800 by 600, because that's what we've set the screen to be. However, there's one more thing we need to do. If we scroll down right here, you see that the width by default is set to be 800 by 400, and that's not what my screen is configured at. We've configured the screen for this presentation to be 800 by 600. So we should go ahead and change the value right here to 800 by 600. Now we can copy all this onto the clipboard. And next, I'll just go ahead and open a Notepad application. I'll go ahead and paste all the code into this Notepad application. And for this purpose of the demonstration, I will just go ahead and save the configuration on my desktop. So go ahead and save this as test.html. So we're just saving this test file on my local desktop and click on save. So now that we saved the file on the desktop, let's go ahead and double click on it on the desktop and check it out and see how it's running. So you see I just open up the Chrome browser and it's loading up all the modules, and of course this is running on my local desktop, but this can just as well run on a website. And there you have it. Signage presentation running just as we configured it. And the real beauty of this configuration is just how dynamic it is. Again, if we look at this channel 2 right here, the red channel, you can see that it's being shared both my high definition output and my embedded output. And this means that if I went and make a change to this and maybe put a different resource here or make any change to my timeline, any player out there that's running my signage presentation, that's configured to run my digital signage campaign via the Signage Player web version, embedded version, or desktop version, will automatically receive the latest configuration as soon as I click on File Save. So if I save my configuration right now and click on Save, and now somebody click on a web version via URL, a page loading via the embedded, or the physical location, all these signage players will run my latest timeline. So I hope you enjoyed this presentation. You should definitely take advantage of the Signage Player embedded version. It's a really nice and quick way to enrich your website. You can actually create banners and you can create some pretty dynamic content and put it onto your website. In some of our future releases, we also are going to add kiosk functionality, so you can kind of create mini websites that you can embed onto your own website, including shopping carts and other tools, so you can have a fully interactive signage presentation that's embedded right onto your website. Thank you.